but to sit down and help them define what their priorities are. And even the most driven entrepreneurs who are great strategic thinkers and have done all these things for their business, they haven't done it for their lives.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. Very, very excited for this week's guest, a buddy of mine, Carl Adkins from Wyoming, Ohio, if that's right. So in Ohio with me. Carl, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Phil. Excited to be on with you.
Well, Carl has a really awesome story, and really what he does is really intriguing. So I'm excited for the audience to learn from him today. Carl is the CEO and lead advisor for Sentinel Private Wealth Group. He's also, just in his bio, he talks about how core values drive everything he does. And I wouldn't say that to our listeners unless I knew that was true from knowing Carl. He's a great guy, married to his wife, Alyssa, and three, it says teenagers. Your oldest, I think he's still a teenager, right?
Yeah, 19 for a few more months.
For a few more months. So definitely a family man and just a good guy all around. So Carl, why don't we start with, what led you to where you are today, kind of your backstory, and we'll get into I want to talk about virtual family office and private wealth and all that stuff a little bit later in the episode, but I really want to get into your backstory because it's pretty intriguing and how we got here.
Yeah. Well, we'll dive right into the deep end then if you're going to my backstory. So, yeah. So, I mean, as a child, I grew up in outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. Came from a broken family. Mom was divorced when I was 3. She was remarried, and stepfather was good for a couple of years and then got involved in drugs and kind of took us down a different path. So, I would just say what started to shape me was I came from a broken family, poverty, if you will. We grew up, lower than blue collar, as people would say, kind of struggling, if you will. My dad worked for a carnival. He was in an orphanage with his twin brother when he was 16. His mom picked him up, and 2 weeks later, his mom died, and her boyfriend at the time owned carnival games, so they put him to work. He eventually met my mom, had kids. So I spent my childhood, like ages 12 to 14, working summers at a carnival, and that's pretty much how I got to know my dad. So you take kind of those two parallel lives, one with my dad at the carnival, one with my mom and stepdad being essentially a drug dealer and not working. We had some rough settings. So grew up around a lot of rough things, bar fights, spent a lot of my childhood in and out of bars, following him around, those kind of things. So that created a chaos in my life, if you will, is what I would say. The silver lining to that is that my mom was amazing. Like, she's this amazing woman who loved me so well. She just had this bad habit of, running into the wrong situation. She had a rough childhood herself, worked 3 jobs, 90 hours a week. We didn't have an education. I was the first person in my family to graduate high school and first one to go into college. So it's appropriate that we're not starting with VFO because I didn't have any idea that I was going to get into, what I'm doing. I'd say I kind of fell into that. But so yeah, childhood was that. What really started to change my life, honestly, was I think God bringing people into my life that invested in me. I would look back and say, just accepted me the way I was. I was different. I was not the kid, Phil, that you're hoping your kids are going to hang out with, right? Yet there were a couple of families whose kids invited me into their home and they accepted me the way I was and loved me. It was through that I came to know Jesus and have a relationship there. My life verse is, I'll just add real quick, 2 Corinthians 5:17. because it talks about being a new creation in Christ. And it was so powerful for me to acknowledge that like all of the brokenness of my past life was accepted and forgiven, and then I had an opportunity to kind of chart a new path. And so I'd say through the providence of Jesus and then used through those people, that kind of started my new path.
So I want to, a lot of our listeners perhaps are doing well and maybe in a different situation than you were growing up. I suspect the families that helped you. So I want to talk about maybe there's an example where maybe that you could group them, but I want to relate that to what we can do today, maybe even what you do today. So how did they have an impact? Like, what did they do a little bit more specifically to have an impact at your impressionable years?
Two key stories and families that I'll point to. First family starts with two twins that I met playing basketball. And, I would hang out after school. I didn't really have anywhere to go. We didn't have family dinner. Mom was working. Stepdad was, nobody knew. And so I would go play ball. And then when ball was over, I didn't really have anywhere to go. And I usually just kind of hung around and lingered toward their house. And eventually I was there almost every night after school. They just accepted me in that much. I would say they were the first people that showed me that unconditional love that I referenced. Didn't matter how different I was. They fully accepted me. And so that would be the best way for me to answer your question. Like, what did they do? Me being so different, yet still invited into their home was really powerful for me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We pay attention to who our kids hang out with and associate with. And I don't know, you're painting yourself as you were certainly in a not a good environment, and you're painting yourself a bit as not a great kid growing up, yet these people accepted you. So I think the lesson there is just, your kids may be around not great kids, and how do you manage that? Because I don't want my kids to pick up those habits, but I also want to reach out and help those kids out.
I love that comment because I think that way about my three kids. So those twins that I referenced, first I'm glad to tell you that 30 plus years later, they're still my best friends, right? I'm on a call with one of them every month with a group of dads, and we've been doing that for almost 10 years. So they've remained close. But what I would tell you, if I learned something from that family, is that they had such a strong set of family values that these kids at age 12 were so confident in who they were that they could invite someone like me into their lives and it not influence who they were.
And
right?
The parents and the kids were confident enough in the foundation they built that they weren't worried about that.
No doubt about it.
So
And I was so attracted to how different they were. Sorry to speak over you, but I saw how we were different. I wanted what they had for sure.
How have you taken that and applied it with your children today? Is it growing them up in a family around faith, but is it also like define core values? Is there any tactics within that you guys put in place?
Yeah. So my wife, Alyssa, and I would say we were definitely winging it as parents. So
Still are.
I don't, yeah, I don't know that we had any great set of tactics. We were very intentional along the way, though it probably wasn't a perfect science to it. We were intentional about what we wanted to create, and we knew we wanted to create a very tight knit, loving family, and we learned to be able to express that in this way. We hoped our kids would come to know Jesus at an earlier age than we did, and that would shape their lives and their identity to be less influenced by the environment around us and all the pressures that brings. We wanted our home to be the safest place to make a mistake. There was no expectation that they had to live up to some standard we were setting for them. We wanted them to know that keeping things in was really dangerous, and that the more you keep hurt and pain and struggle to yourself, the tighter grip it gets on you and the more damage that it does. And so if we could create this environment where mistakes and struggle were normal, almost expected, and that we could talk openly about that, we just thought that would be a healthier environment. and we think that played out. Most importantly, we were very intentional about talking about our own mistakes with them. I exposed them to the chaos in my life at what I thought was an age appropriate time. That was me talking about a lot of the bad things that I did. And then present day, as Alyssa and I were acknowledging the ways we were, imperfect and making mistakes, getting parenting wrong, we just tried to be really open about that. So those kinds of things, I think, shaped the kind of, environment that we wanted for our family. And I think that helped a lot.
So if we go back to, okay, so you had this childhood, you had a couple of families that came into your life and really influenced you in a positive way. What happened next? How did this roll out?
Before I answer that fully, I got to tell you about the second family, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
And then it'll lead into that question. So I'm finishing the summer after my 8th grade year, and I'm working at the carnival, and I came home for football camp. And I'm at football camp, soon to be a freshman, and the senior quarterback comes to me and says, "Hey, I heard you need a place to stay for a couple of weeks. Why don't you come stay with me?" I have 4 older sisters. They all moved out. And that was true. So what I didn't tell you is at the end of my 8th grade year, there was a big blow up fight at our trailer. Mom's stepdad was kind of the final straw. Stepdad was out of the picture. I needed a place to stay to finish my 8th grade year. I went and stayed with my best friend, and praise the Lord for that family, bringing me in at a moment's notice. Let me finish that. After that, as we got into that summer, Mom wanted to move back to Columbus. I was in 9 schools by 4th grade. And as I finished 8th grade, I just said, "Mom, I've got a friend group. Like, I'm finally feeling ingrained here. I can't move again." So she was getting an apartment for my older brother and I. He was to be a senior. I was to be a freshman. We were to essentially live there by ourselves. She was going to commute back and forth, kind of doing the best she could, working her 90 hours a week, right? So I needed a place to stay for a couple of weeks while that place was ready. The short of it is I moved in for the 2 weeks and I never left. And what I walked into was this amazing family with this couple, my second mom and dad, as they became, who had raised these 4 daughters, had this son. They were about to be empty nesters. And here I came with no structure. I was mannered. My parents taught me manners. I wasn't a rude kid necessarily, but at that point, I just had no rules. I would come and go as I pleased. And I walked into this family where family dinner mattered. Every event I had mattered. So I grew up playing sports, but I never had any family member at anything I did. I was a kid. I always needed a ride to every practice and every game because there was nobody around. So the dad of this adopted family is a pilot. This is how committed he was. We lived in Columbus. He'd fly out of Cincinnati. I'd have a Friday night basketball game. He'd be in Miami. He would jump seat home to Cincinnati, drive to Columbus, watch my game, wait for me on the court in his pilot uniform so he could see me when the coach talk was done, get back in his car, drive to Cincinnati so he could jump seat back to Miami and be ready for his flight the next day. Like, there was that level of commitment to family and support of everything we did. And I just had to tell you that because in hindsight, just amazing the way God used that family to shape my vision of what I wanted our family to be. The love and the connection and all the things that they do. I always get emotional when I think about it. So that's had such an incredible impact on who I wanted to be and how we wanted to shape. And my family, and I never left. So 2 weeks became forever. And I ended up with this amazing second family, and they all accepted me and loved me and still do. And so that was a real blessing. And that even impacted how I grew my relationship with my mom and especially with my dad. It made all of it better.
Was that family, first of all, thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
For our listeners, I mean, that's seeing Carl's face and emotion, it how much of an impact they had. Hopefully you can feel it like I can see it here. Was that so the commitment, but was the family, like, were they strict structure? So I'm thinking of, I just read the book Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. I don't know if you've read that or not, but kids want structure and they want firmness. They want someone that is strong in their beliefs and doesn't go away from those. Even though they might convey, they want you to go away from your beliefs because it's
Yeah.
easier on them. They really don't want that, was the key message and takeaway I took from that. But tell me, I mean, you just have so many different perspectives from your childhood. And the other thing is you can be a great teacher based on your past self, right? So because of that perspective, I think you can help a lot of people out and give the perspective you've gained. So were they like, what was their style, and what did you appreciate so much about them, maybe at that time?
Yeah. Um, they weren't authoritarians, if that's the right word. Like they didn't parent in a super strict way. It was more of like an assumed expectation that they respected me, but they expected some things in return. So examples would be, I didn't want to come home for dinner because I was out playing with my friends, but no, it became an expectation. We were having family dinner, right? And my freshman year, my brother's senior year, we both played all the sports and did all the things. So that was hard. But mom showed an absolute commitment that we were sitting down as a family for dinner if it was 15 minutes, and it didn't matter if I wanted to play with my friends. So in that way, did I fight that in the moment? Probably. Did I value that? Absolutely. And I began to appreciate it even as a teenager. I never had a curfew. So if I had a girlfriend, I didn't ever have to be home. She'd give me a curfew, tell me to be home at 10 o'clock on a school night. And I'd look at her like she was crazy. Like, what? Obviously, those were good boundaries for me.
Right.
So those two things come to mind quickly. I would say I agree with the premise of that book, right?
Yeah.
Those are really important.
So high school, I mean, new mom and dad, literally.
Yeah.
And what happens after that? Kind of by your senior year, you have it together and you're kind of off to this more, I guess, structured, and I'll say air quotes, normal path, or what happened next?
Yeah, I laughed a little bit because I think in my childhood, as crazy as it was, I grew up really early. Um, and so I remember at 11, 12 years old, my mom would come in from her third job, which was bartending, and it'd be 2 a.m. by the time she got back to us. And she would come in and sit on my bed and just talk to me, share problems with me. And somehow at that young age, I was equipped to take all that in, and kind of be some support system for her. Right. And then I remember at that young age, like I worked, I saved money, and I just wished so bad I could do something to make her life not be so hard. Right. So I had that part of me. But then I had this, when I was doing all the other things like I did, I started smoking at 7 and drinking like hard liquor at 12. And I was going down this path that was dangerous, right? And we all know who you surround yourself with, that matters. And those are the people I was surrounding myself with. And so meeting these other two families, it changed who I was surrounding myself with, and it changed my life, right? So then I got to high school and it did start to look a little more normal, because I had family structure, and that just was so valuable. I graduated high school. I went to college. I went to Asbury College, which is a small Christian school in Wilmore, right outside of Lexington. I almost went to another school. It was probably the first time I heard God not audibly speak, but communicate with me clearly. Like I was about to go the wrong way because I had cleaned up a little bit, and then I had started to kind of drift back. And so, whatever. He took me to Asbury. Great 4 years of my life. Um, for sure, surrounded by incredible friends that are still my best friends today that I do life with. They're there with me through the good and the bad. And so the blessing through all of that is that God really did surround me with amazing people, and they became that support and accountability system for me. And there are so many of them are still in my life today. I've been really blessed by that, and that certainly carried me on my path. Um,
So, what comes to mind for me as we transition to what you do today a little bit more, and talking about just wealth management, and really that's a small topic relative to who you become overall, I'll just say. We will talk about it because I think there's an interest in wealth and business and real estate, of course. But your past, two things I wrote down is your past doesn't define you, right? Like you are it. Maybe it positions you, maybe it helps you, maybe there's a reason for it that while you were in it, you didn't know what it was and it felt horrible and painful and just you couldn't understand it at that time. And maybe you don't completely understand it because that was a lot. I mean, you went through a lot of hardships, challenges, trauma. So maybe it's still, this is easy for me to say, right? I guess, but it didn't define you. For sure, you didn't let it define who you are, not only your past, but also events. And I think it probably built this muscle where today, if you face obstacles and challenges, events don't define you. Who you are
Mhm.
during the events defines who you are. Like who you are and doing the right thing, especially if it's from a faith perspective, like that's what defines you. Does that resonate with you, or how would you change the message to our listeners?
Very much resonates. Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful for my past, and there's no doubt that it helped shape who I am today. It created my drive and my passion for sure. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't matter what obstacle I go through. I'm seeing past that and how I'm going to like get on to what's next. Like, it isn't going to define me. I've been through lots of hardship. The bottom that we were in, uh, yeah. I mean, I don't. So it shapes me in a big way, and I agree with you that it in no way defines me. I want to elaborate a little bit on how that connects because some some even the work that I'm doing today and just I believe we never arrive at anything, that we're always in process. And if I'm in this process of continuing to discover who I am and who I'm called to be, it's interesting that my childhood, and I would just kind of call it like, a little bit of chaos, that I've never done a lot of work to unpack how that shaped me. I haven't felt like I've had carried trauma from that. So I'm grateful for that because I have close friends who had similar experiences, maybe not the details, but tough childhood, and that stays with them, and it's traumatic for them. So I'm grateful for that. I had this realization recently, and it was in some enneagram work that I've been doing. So that's kind of connected to me with me a lot. But I'm learning that if you're an enneagram person, I'm a number two, which I'm a helper, and so I find value in doing for other people, and uh, in the chaos of my life as a child, I felt like I was the stable one holding it all together for my whole family. My older brother looked to me for help. I got my mom and my brother up and ready for school and work every morning, made my mom coffee, right? I'm 12 years old, right? My mom sharing her problems with me. And so I'm doing all of that. And what I've learned looking back is that's how I feel like I'm adding value to anyone's life. The second thing I've learned is that what I need, what I crave is affection, right? And so while my childhood sounds so crazy, what struck me recently is that God created me perfectly for the situation that I was in. I find value in helping people, and I was able to fill a role to help all of these people. All I needed was love and affection. And my mom, for all the struggle she loved me perfectly, unconditionally. And I can't give proper reference, but I heard from a book recently where it said, like, if you have true unconditional love in your life, you can overcome anything. And that just clicked with me. I'm like, that's it. By the grace of God, my mom loved me so much that none of that mattered. So it's been powerful for me, even in the last few months, to have that realization about my childhood. And then it expands into, right, all of those experiences created, like, you start building up these layers to protect yourself from all the things that you go through. What the journey that I'm on now is trying to uncover, right, who am I called to be? Who is my true, or what is my authentic self, and what are all the layers that I've built up as a result of my past experiences or my fears that are keeping me from showing up as my authentic self, and how do I start to break away those kind of layers that have built up. um,
Real quick for
yep.
listeners, Enneagram, personality, upbringing, it's kind of helping you understand yourself. And there's like scales and numbers. Like explain that just for 20 seconds or so. or
Yeah.
whatever it
So,
takes.
yeah. So you would like an Enneagram maybe to some personality assessment, but I'd say that it's so much more. Uh, if we could agree in a lot of different disciplines that awareness is really important. And the Enneagram is us becoming aware of who we are naturally created to be, and then how we relate to other people and other things in the world. And if I can understand who I am, and maybe I begin to understand who you are, I can appreciate better how we relate to each other. It exposes what I like about it is that it not only exposes who I am, but then it says that we all have this healthy, average, or unhealthy version of ourselves. And that in reality, we probably fluctuate in and out of each of those categories throughout the course of any given day. And I'm going to be a better version of myself if I can catch when I'm fading into that unhealthy version of me, and that awareness allows me to stop it and realize I actually have some control to change that.
Yeah,
And so that's been really powerful for me.
I think one of the most important traits for someone, or maybe disciplines, whatever it might be, is building your own self-awareness. And if there's different tools,
Mm-hmm.
coaches, mentors, people around you, however you can do that, I think that can only help us understand ourselves better. So
And I agree.
I really appreciate you just spending a little bit more time on that. So up to this point, Carl, we've talked a lot about challenges and issues, but there's another side of this. People are like, what? So tough childhood, but what does this guy do? So I want to fast forward
Yeah.
to virtual family office and kind of what that is. And if there's a story or anything that led to that, but really feel free to tell that. And then what is a family office? What is a virtual family office? What does that look like? Who does it apply to? Help the listeners with some of that.
Yeah. I appreciate the question. Makes sense. We're not spending a lot of time there. I'm passionate about what we do. And I do think that my childhood and the journey did help shape how I got here. So, I got out of college. I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I came to Cincinnati. I had 5 interviews in 5 days. I took a job, just so happened to be in mortgages, and that led me to a world of finance. And I was fortunate to kind of get recruited to, a big global bank, and then eventually move on to this world. What I started out doing though was working with people in finance, but it was in a transactional nature. And so I learned, I'd say, as I started to grow up and actually consider, like, all right, what are my skill sets? How am I gifted? How should I be thinking about a career? I learned I loved working with people. And I really think that what I've learned from the Enneagram affirms this. Like, I knew my life was changed because of the people and the way they invested in me. And all I wanted as a life calling before I picked a profession was to do the same. Like, I want to be able to have an impact on other people. I desire genuine relationships, and I really want to impact other people in a positive way. Like, how can I help? And so I just knew that I didn't know what to do with it in my life. So I got involved. I wanted to work with people. I knew I loved working with people. I'd heard that from people before. I should find a job doing that. Initially, all of my work with people in finance was transactional. So I'd get to know you. We'd work together for 30 days. That was great. But maybe I help you get a mortgage on your property, or I help you execute some kind of lending facility, and then we'd move on. And so I had one person in my life through my adopted brother that was an advisor. And as I started to talk to him about his job, what I learned I would love is the ability to develop these relationships and maintain them long term, right? As opposed to having a transaction. I don't like the idea of the transaction. So I became a second career advisor, and started my journey into wealth management. I'll spare you a lot of the journey of, like, how I got to where I am today. But today, I'm fortunate to have an amazing partner and an incredible team. And we are, as you said, a virtual family office. And I'd explain it like this. If you're $1 billion family, you would have the resources to hire every advisor that you needed to serve all of your family's needs. You could bring all that in-house, and all of that team that you create could take care of everything that you needed for your businesses, for your family, for your wealth, for your kids, estate tax planning, insurance, medical concierge. What could you come up with? You'd hire someone to take care of that for your family, to make sure they were all in the best hands. Not everyone has the resources for that. And so we deliver those types of services, but we call it virtual family office because we built this team, some of which are internal on our team, others where we don't have that resource internally in our team. We built the relationships outside of our team so that we can deliver all of that to families, call it 10 to $200 million net worth, who have a lot of these needs, but don't have the resources to bring them together. Maybe more important than not having the resources is that they don't necessarily know how. Like a lot of these people are entrepreneurs, business owners, and as most of your listeners I'm sure know, you're so focused on those things that you're doing running your business, you don't often pull back enough to acknowledge all of the other things that you need to do to protect yourself, your business, your family, and set all those things up. And so we'd say, call us your CFO. We partner with you, but we take the lead to help you build that team of advisors so that we can then deliver in collaboration with those other advisors everything that you would need to execute then on that family office.
And what I would say is I tell people, just let's simplify it and then come back to what you're doing. If you have a CPA, a lot of times CPAs will do their job, but they're just looking at the paper and they're providing you the return like based on the numbers you give. But it's really important, I think, for you as an individual to know what questions to ask of that CPA, right? So if you don't have a CPA that's overly strategic, you need to ask them a lot of questions. What you're doing is you're not just saying, here are the questions you should ask the CPA. You're saying, here's how we look at this holistically. And if we have a financial advisor, a CPA, an attorney, the different types of attorneys, whatever it might be, you're looking at this person's overall strategy. You know either the direction to provide or the questions to ask that team of people to help guide the overall financial strategy. So there's at a tactical level, there's CPAs or attorneys respond to work. You're taking it not just like I work with a CPA and I'd say I'll ask questions to be strategic, but you're taking it even to a next level and saying, okay, if we look at the entire picture, how do we bring this all together and be strategic?
Yeah, really well said. And the key word is that we are being proactive for you, right? Because one of the things we have to do for most clients is help them actually have a more detailed tax strategy because no knock on CPAs, but most CPAs are reactive and are filing returns.
Yeah.
Right. And even if they have all the knowledge, they're not taking the time to be proactive and get to know your business and the details of it so they can figure out a way to be more strategic with your tax. So yeah, being proactive in those conversations is very, very important.
I think the other part of it is I'll just stick with the CPA example, but a lot of CPAs are generalists, which means they're serving, real estate investors, but small business owners, W-2 earners, they're serving everybody. So they're not even specialists. So therefore they're just responding. Whereas you're looking at the whole picture. And not only are you going to the CPA, but you might be going to a specialist CPA that knows is the best in the world in that specific industry or with that specific issue. So you have the connections to know which attorney to go to. You don't just have one attorney you refer to. It's who's the expert attorney on that topic. So there's a lot of layers to this that add a lot of value. Who does this make so virtual family office, you kind of said $1 billion for just a full private in-house family office. Who does this make sense for to have a virtual family office? And then my next question is if someone's not to that point yet, what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, great question. The ideal client, if you're asking who we're working with, it's less about the net worth and it's more about the person and the trajectory. Right? We have been in business long enough that we're not kind of desperately seeking for anyone that has the dollars because you don't enjoy working with everyone, or if philosophies aren't aligned, it's not going to be a productive relationship. So we want to work with people that are entrepreneurially minded. We have a lot of business owners, real estate. We have people that maybe they're a surgeon or maybe they have a different profession, but they think like an entrepreneur in terms of how they're growing. And so that kind of a person becomes a great client. We have a lot of fun getting in the weeds. We love strategic thinking with them. And a lot of times we're approaching them with things they're not thinking of. Hey, you make $1 million W-2 and you're just content paying $300,000 a year in taxes. Let's figure out a way to shift that. So strategically, that becomes a lot of fun. If you would say, hey, you're not yet to that point where you can hire someone or be a part of a virtual family office, you keep surrounding yourself with the right kind of people, though. I mean, it's what we do in the groups that we're in together, right? You're surrounding yourself with like-minded people who are thinking like you and have the aspirations to keep growing in that direction. I mean, that's not even, sometimes that's surrounding yourself with the advisors, but it's just the people that are maybe even a couple of steps ahead of you. If you can surround yourself with those people, that's going to be really good. I mean, you've read it too, right? If you want to see what you're going to look like in 5 years, you look at the 3 to 5 closest people in your life.
Yeah.
So
And I think there's two elements of this. I think there's your peers that you hang out with, like the circles you run in, and just what you can learn from those associations. That's one. But two, I think from a business and financial perspective, if you're not at a stage where you're ready to build or hire a virtual family office, you need to be thinking about, you need to be building your own team. So if
yeah,
you should have your go-to CPA, your go-to attorney, your go-to financial advisor, maybe even some specialists on different topics like 1031 exchanges or whatever it might be. Build out that team of people while you maybe if you're not ready yet for a virtual family office. The bottom line
that's right.
is build a team, right? You can be a single point of contact for people that has you've already built that team for them. So it simplifies the
Yeah.
process big time and it helps with the strategy and you've done it before. But if you're not ready for that, start building your team now. And then in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, you can work with the one and only Carl Adkins. So I like that.
Right. I will add one thing to what you said. So no matter what stage you are in your journey, wealth accumulation, one of the most powerful things we do is to sit down with both the husband and wife, if it's a couple, if it's business partners, both of the partners, but to sit down and help them define what their priorities are. And even the most driven entrepreneurs who are great strategic thinkers and have done all these things for their business, they haven't done it for their lives. They haven't said. So we sit down and we play a card game, right? It's not your typical get to know you where you're filling out a questionnaire and just sending a bunch of data. We think that the qualitative matters a whole lot more. And so we sit down and we play this card game, and it becomes a really fun way for us to have a husband and wife lay out what's important to them. What are their priorities, core values? How do they envision their future? What are the things that they're afraid of? And it gives them a context to begin to define these things in a way that they haven't before. And one of the ways that it's really powerful is that in most couples, there's someone who handles the finances, and then there's someone who doesn't and just trusts the other person to do it. And they don't really want to be involved in it. And we always make the commitment, we're not going to come in and talk about stocks or insurance or taxes, any of that stuff for that person that doesn't want that. But we're going to talk about you and your future and your family. And I bet those things matter to you. And they always say yes. And some of the best feedback we've received is from that spouse who isn't usually involved, who says, I've never felt so included in this conversation that we're having, and yet they're engaged in it. Right? It's not a boring financial conversation, but they're engaged in it, and then they get a voice into how all of this is being built. And then I can go have the in-depth conversations about investments or taxes or structures with the spouse that cares to do that. But we know that now everything we do, every recommendation we make is consistent with how they've defined their priorities and what they want. And it's the perfect litmus test, right? How do we know we're making the right recommendations? Well, because I can connect it to what you said you wanted or what we were building toward. And it becomes a great filter for us to process all the decisions we make.
Well, for us crazy entrepreneurs that are maybe trying to talk to our spouses about what we're doing and numbers and business and finance, it first of all, that's not the right approach. I say that tongue in cheek because
Yeah.
what's important is having this, like, if you, maybe you can have that conversation if you're first having the conversation as to why you're doing that, right? So if you get clear on your priorities and your core values, as you said, and you're aligned with your spouse, your significant other, if you do that first, then maybe the business, or like there's a meaning behind the business discussions or the finance discussions, because it should be supporting a different cause, right? It shouldn't be just serving you to serve you. It should be serving some other purpose. In my opinion, it should be serving, ultimately money should be serving some other purpose other than just money for money's sake. So if you're aligned on that, maybe it enables those financial discussions too within the household.
It's well said, because if you're chasing money for the sake of money, it's empty, right? Like
Yep.
it's going to be fleeting. It's going to leave you empty. But you're right. If you can connect, here's why we're doing this and what we're going to do with the results of the success you have there, it does then fund a lot of those other priorities and core values in life. So very, very much connects.
Well, I appreciate the overview too on the family, just the virtual family office, what a family office is in general. You know, I've also heard the analogy like, okay, imagine Oprah, who has just CPAs, attorneys, financial advisors, all kind of people lined up for her. Will you provide that at without someone needing to have the resources of an Oprah? I don't know if that's a good example or not,
Yeah,
but
that is a good, perfect example. Yep.
so I appreciate that. I want to shift gears a little bit, and I just, as you reflect on, you know, you talked about your childhood, you talked about briefly about your career and adult life and how that has transpired and really what you do today. But if you step back and reflect, how does what you do make you feel?
Very satisfying. Yeah. I mean, I don't have the best words for it, because anybody that's an advisor is going to say they love to help people. But as I connect to who I believe God's created me to be, when I think about the enneagram, when I think about my childhood, when I think about the way people have invested it in me, and help shape who I am, it very much lines up with the work we do with families. I believe there's real meaning in it. I believe there's real purpose. I believe we serve a need that is a significant one for the families that we work with, and there's an opportunity to have a real impact. Oftentimes, what we do and the way we do it, I think that's unique in the way we have those priority conversations. Is the way it's unique in the way we stay engaged in the families that we work with, and we do allow them even to expand their impact in terms of what they do with their resources. Very, very big focus on how they shape their children, and we spend a lot of time on helping educate next gen. How do we, if a lot of our clients are G1 or G2 wealth, and they have really generational wealth, how do you make sure that wealth doesn't ruin someone, right? Connect to mine. I know I'm driven in a way because of our lack of resources, right? The latter part of my life, our children have had a different experience than that, and they've had more resources. How do I make sure they're not entitled and they appreciate what they have and they have the same work ethic to work hard? And that's 10 times over for clients that we're working. So, and maybe a long answer, but just the opportunity to have impact to me is very significant.
Well, and first of all, I talked to Barry yesterday. So just for the group,
Nice.
there was a speaker, and like he works with just kids, and how you develop kids and just, avoid entitlement and all kinds of other issues. So I think a lot of people, I think we're doing okay at that, like because of our faith, our core values, things like that. But it's always good to get different perspectives. So my point of that is to say that when Carl talks about that, it's real. My other takeaway is, there might be real estate investors, entrepreneurs, people that want to quit their job, people want to leave their W-2, all kinds of different people. What you do doesn't, first of all, it doesn't define you, but also it doesn't limit the impact you can have, right? For me, like we talked about this a little bit before the call as I was setting it up. Real estate is my vehicle. It's okay. It has financial returns on it, and that's fantastic. But it's also a vehicle to maybe get attention of an audience that I can then bring on a Carl Adkins onto a podcast and have an impact in a different way, right? So for me, it's a vehicle so I think you and I are similar in that money, wealth, financials, whatever you want to call it, can be a vehicle to get people's attention. But what are you doing with that? what impact are you having with whatever you're doing? And it doesn't need to be real estate or wealth management. It can be something completely different, but you can figure out how to have impact within what you do, I think.
I completely agree. If I can add to that briefly, I think with the enneagram, and honestly, I've read 2 additional books recently that have kind of reinforced this same thing. It's this notion that I would say this to your audience, wherever you are right now is right where you're supposed to be, right? And the journey from here is the process that we're all in, hopefully moving toward finding our true authentic self, finding that inner peace, finding true presence. Phil, you and I have talked about this in the past, right? Like last year, I just felt so much, I would call it anxiety, that kind of permeated everything I do, that I wasn't present. I couldn't sit down and talk with you and be present. I wasn't bringing my best self to that conversation because my mind was somewhere else. Like, just in process of working toward that kind of peace where we can be fully present, so that you can be 100% who you are, who you were meant to be in each situation. I think that brings more strength, that brings more joy, that allows for more impact. And so if the message is right where you are today is right where you're supposed to be, just be on that journey in process of continuing to move toward the best version of yourself, as we say in our circles.
So you interact with a lot of other entrepreneurs, business owners, families. When you observe others and see what they're doing, what frustrates you?
Do you mean specifically for clients or broader?
Yeah, just like if you see somebody like, I just want to shake you, or like just wait, whatever. What causes what creates that in you? And maybe maybe you don't have that, but if you do, you're laughing. So I hope we got something good here.
I don't. I'm going to disappoint you. I'm laughing because you talk about these things where you can see someone's demise and it's like a car wreck in slow motion, but you can't do anything about it, right? And how many times are we in that with the people closest to us, and you just don't know that you can say anything, right? So I will say we all need the types of relationships where someone can see that in us and call us out on it, because we all have blind spots, right? And they're called blind spots for a reason. Patrick Lencioni did a great short work on blind spots that was impactful for me. You just can't see them. We need someone that we trust enough to hold a mirror up for us, right? I know I've got those things in my life. I'm grateful to have people around me that can hopefully call me out on that.
I like that a lot. If we kind of look back the last few years, whatever it is, key factor success for you, what do you think that has been?
Yeah, to me, it seems to always be about relationships and the people that you're around. That matters a lot. I did hear this just this week. Kind of said like it's important who you are, because you're not given opportunities if you don't present yourself in a way that other people trust you enough to put you in the room with another opportunity or to introduce you to somebody. So if I could connect those 2 things, I'm grateful to have maybe been able to present myself in a way that people trust me, or I believe I'm authentic in how I present myself. And then to be surrounded by people that are willing to introduce me to other people that can help me, or opportunities as they might be for advancement and other things. The connection of those 2 things, I'd say that's the biggest impact of the few years. Still all about people in my life.
Awesome. And I can say from our perspective, you've built that with me. So I think you're doing a great job. Tell me about you referenced some books. By the way, you gave me some books early in the year that were really phenomenal. The 4x8 Principle was a great recommendation from you. I bet I recommended that to at least 10, if not 20 others. So just, the ripple effect of you, and I'm sure you're telling other people about that book, but hopefully I didn't steal it. But so for you,
No.
a really impactful business or personal development book.
Yeah, so 2023, the most impactful book in my life for sure was Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I see it on your shelf back there. John Mark Comer, the way he breaks down, as I refer to it, being present I think was really, really powerful. And the work towards silence and solitude and the healing in that, it was powerful. I could go on and on. We don't have time for that. The 4-8 Principle is a book. I'll just re-emphasize it. I mean, I read that book years ago. In some ways, it's a pretty simplistic book, but it is so powerful. And I bet it speaks to 95% of the people in this audience, right? In terms of what we go through mentally and how we can learn to have more mental discipline and strength as we go through the struggles of life, right? I couldn't emphasize that one enough. Another book I've referenced a couple times is called Shine.
Okay.
And I don't remember the author. Shame on me for that. And then I talked about the Enneagram a lot. And I think if you're new to the Enneagram, as far as I know, the best kind of intro book to that is The Road Back to You, which is a great intro on the Enneagram and what that's about.
Awesome. 4x8 Principle and Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I've read both. If you read those two books, you will be changed for some, like in some way. They're both phenomenal books. So thank you for that. I'll have to check out the other two because I haven't read them. So now, but people are like, now I got 4 more books to read. So sorry about that, but keep educating yourself. Carl, how can our listeners find out more about you?
Great question. So our website, Sentinel Private Wealth Group, we're in Cincinnati, Ohio. If you're looking for us professionally, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not active on social media on things like Facebook and Instagram, but I am there, and you could find me that way as well.
Awesome, Carl. Well, I really appreciate it. I appreciate our friendship and continuing to build it, and just the wisdom that you share with me when we're together. And I really appreciate you bringing that wisdom to our listeners today. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I've enjoyed getting to know you. You know this already. And I felt very ill-equipped to be on your show today, but I did enjoy the conversation. So thanks for leading us through it.
Carl, you delivered. I appreciate it. For the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Moeller Real Estate, visit our website at www.moellerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.